U.S. presidential election could have a profound effect on the outcome of the war in Ukraine and, by extension, the future of European security. Given the stakes involved, Ukrainians everywhere are wondering how the next days and weeks will impact the future of their country. Joining me now are my guests Sergiy Kudelia, Associate Professor of Political Science at Baylor University in Texas, and Mikhail Alexseev, Professor of San Diego State University, to discuss how the results of the U.S. election might affect Ukraine.
Hello.
A very good morning. Hello. Thank you for joining me here on the program.
Well, good evening still from California.
Good evening. Good evening indeed. So, considering the results so far, what we've been seeing, I'm trying to actually refresh the results to keep my eye, a close watch over it. What's the Zelinskys' plan depending on who wins this election?
Well, Zelensky, I think, clearly tried to balance his approach to presidential candidates. We saw during his last visit to the United States that he tried to meet with both candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Of course, he was much more successful in getting a meeting with Kamala Harris quickly. Donald Trump required some additional prodding on the part of the Ukrainians, but he ultimately succeeded in doing that. And I think it was important that Zelensky and Donald Trump, who looks like he will be the next president of the United States again, based on the early results, it was important that Donald Trump and Zelensky appeared together in New York in the Trump Tower, and both of them spoke about the importance of addressing the Russian-Ukrainian war and addressing the Ukrainian security needs. Of course, there is a big debate about how exactly Trump will respond in the coming weeks and months, especially after he becomes president. And most likely, based on what we hear from him and from his close circle, he will seek to start or launch some kind of a negotiation process between Russia and Ukraine. It is very unlikely that he will be quickly successful. So the big question is, when he sees and realizes that Putin is not going to start negotiations with Ukraine, that Putin wants to continue waging his war against Ukraine, what will be Trump's response then?
So, in an interview that Mr. Zelensky gave in late May, he admitted that, I quote, he had no strategy yet for what to do if Trump was to actually win the election and return to the White House. And he actually outlined a plan that was supposed to appeal to the candidate's vanity. He warned Trump that he risked being tagged as a loser president, I quote, if he allowed Russia to win the war. Do you think that this tactic of humiliation could actually work, Mr. Alexseev?
Actually, I think it's absolutely going to work. In fact, I was just canvassing in North Carolina. I knocked maybe on 500 doors, and I was driving around. I was listening to this new book by Bob Woodward on war and his interviews with Trump and conversations between Trump and the States. And it's so clear that Trump hates looking weak. And in fact, he can even make some rash and irrational decisions if he fears that he may be losing. So I think in that sense, that Zelensky strategy will be absolutely on point. And I do think that overall, though, there are other factors that may play into this. So what we have in the choice between Harris and Trump is not necessarily the degree of support for Ukraine, but the stability versus turbulence. And the turbulence can go both ways. And it looks like Zelensky understands the psychology and the motivations for Trump.
Your commentary on what just happened. We now know that potentially, judging by what just happened, we might be further away from the Democratic win than ever. Your commentary, please. Mr. Kudelia.
Well, it looks very likely that Trump will be the next president based on these results. And I think we have to be prepared to the fact that a lot of people in the Trump administration will be very skeptical about further assistance to Ukraine. And I think when we talk about larger impact for Europe, it will be a challenge for European countries, because you mentioned in your reports that Germany is one of the slowest countries as far as support for Ukraine is concerned. Now, if you compare Trump's rhetoric about Ukraine to AfD's rhetoric, which is Alternative for Germany, a far-right political party, they're actually completely identical. They speak in exactly the same terms. So imagine that the leader of the United States could be, very likely will be a person who speaks in the same language as the leaders of the far-right party in Germany. And that, of course, will have an effect on Scholz. It will have an effect on the foreign policy of Germany. It will likely split European countries as far as Ukraine is concerned. And I'm very doubtful that in the next couple of months, we will see a unity response among Europeans to the election of Donald Trump. In fact, I think it will give justification to those countries like Germany, who are very slow in provision of assistance, to keep delaying that assistance in the future.
So, Mr. Alexseev, Donald Trump stated that he would end the war in Ukraine quickly, even potentially before taking office. How realistic is this, and how would it actually impact the territorial integrity of Ukraine if he decided to go down that road?
Well, it's completely unrealistic. Having been monitoring and examining Putin's motivations for years and years, I don't believe that Trump can offer Putin some territorial gains and that Putin would agree to it and simply freeze the conflict, and then let everything else be decided politically. I think that Putin wants certain conditions. If we remember his ultimatum back in December 2021, he even wanted NATO troops to be withdrawn from Eastern Europe and roll back NATO membership for countries like Poland. So if you think what Putin wants and what Trump can offer, then I think it's extremely unrealistic. The only way that Trump can get this if he actually gives more military support to Ukraine, if Ukraine inflicts significantly more losses on Russia, which demonstrates to Putin that Ukraine gets something that he can't counter. And only then there would be some kind of path to any resolution. But that would take those conditions. It will take the realization, it will take the flip-flop on the part of Trump, and it would take the action on the part of Ukraine.
Mr. Kudelia, how do you think that Ukraine's military situation and the sort of aid to Ukraine from the U.S. in terms of military could change if Donald Trump was to take office? Only earlier today I spoke to Mr. Bryce Barris, security fellow at the Truman National Security Project, and he said that Donald Trump would not be withholding total help for Ukraine. So where do we stand? Where does he stand on this, and what could we potentially expect if he takes office?
So Trump represents as a wing within the Republican Party, an isolationist wing within the Republican Party that believes that the United States should stop or cut significantly its spending on foreign powers. And for the last year, more than a year, most of the spokespeople of this Republican Trumpist wing of the Republican Party were adamant opponents of further assistance to Ukraine. In fact, one of the reasons why the US Congress delayed the provision of aid to Ukraine for about 6 months, which led to significant losses of territory in Ukraine and retreat of Ukrainian troops, was exactly because Donald Trump and his supporters in Congress insisted on making sure that this aid package is not adopted. And it took really significant efforts on the part of many, including Ukrainian diplomats, to ultimately get this aid through. And most of them are saying that this is the last aid package, significant aid package for Ukraine. Next year is going to be different. So I would not be holding high expectations about how easy it would be to continue with assistance to Ukraine. And of course, we also have to recognize that in addition to him being just averse to provision of financial assistance, Donald Trump in general has a very skeptical view about international law, about territorial integrity of other states. He does not have the same type of investment in these principles of the international law as the Biden administration has. And he does not, from all we saw, does not believe in the possibility of Ukraine defeating Russia convincingly. He, in fact, believes that Ukraine should give up some of its territories in order to make a deal. He said that several times, and his spokespeople said that several times. So I think that would be the emphasis in the next several months of his rhetoric and his statements.
Mr. Alexseev, we just spoke about the president and the aid to Ukraine, the military aid to Ukraine, but how crucial do you think is the U.S. Congress when it comes to providing that aid, considering if we have Republicans controlling the Senate and Democrats controlling the House, what impact could this have when it comes to Ukraine receiving that support? Is there any sort of a combination that could possibly still aid Ukraine in that scenario?
Well, the best thing I think that Ukraine can hope for if Trump wins is actually some kind of a lend-lease legislation. This was something that Speaker Johnson discussed with Trump while the $61 billion package was on hold. And in some ways, it might be beneficial because there would be perhaps more flexibility, perhaps even, more funding than you can get if you simply authorize some one-year assistance package. And Congress, of course, does play a role because you still have a lot of members of the Republican Party in Congress who do hold internationalist views for various reasons. They may be in districts with East European populations or more traditional Republicans. And so one argument, for example, that Michael Johnson used with Donald Trump to unlock that package of assistance earlier this year was that if he does that, then he can get both the MAGA Republicans and the traditional Republicans endorse his candidacy and endorse his effort to become president.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately our time has come to an end. Thank you so much for joining me, and please stay with us as we will be probably getting back to you to get more on this very dynamic situation. Sergiy Kudelia, Associate Professor of Political Science at Baylor University in Texas, and Mikhail Alexseev, Professor at San Diego State University.